There's a number that separates people who build wealth from people who just think about building wealth. It's not their income. It's not their age. It's not even how much they invest. It's $23. That's what the average American spends per day on things they'll forget about by next week. Coffee. Lunch. A streaming service they signed up for during a free trial in 2019. Small purchases that feel like nothing in the moment. But when you run the actual math over 10 years, the number that comes out the other end is so large it starts to feel personal. Because here's what nobody tells you. The gap between financial security and permanent struggle isn't created by one big decision. It's created by 1,000 tiny ones you make before breakfast. And the people who figured this out early didn't do it because they were smarter or luckier. They did it because they started tracking something everyone else ignores. Let's talk about what happened to Sarah. Sarah makes $62,000 a year. She's not rich, but she's not broke either. She lives in a mid-sized city, has a decent job, no kids, drives a used car. On paper, she should be fine, but every month Sarah runs out of money before she runs out of days. And she has no idea where it goes. She's not buying designer bags or taking luxury vacations. She's just living. Grabbing dinner with friends, buying groceries without a list, ordering things online when she's bored. Normal stuff. And that's the problem. Because Sarah is participating in the most expensive financial behavior in modern life. Unconscious spending. Not reckless spending. Not irresponsible spending. Just untracked spending. Money leaving her account in amounts too small to trigger alarm bells, but too frequent to ignore over time. And when Sarah finally sat down and added it up, she realized she'd spent $18,000 in 1 year on things that didn't improve her life in any measurable way. $18,000. That's nearly a third of her take-home pay. Gone. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. If Sarah had taken just half of that money and put it into a simple index fund, earning a conservative 8% annual return, in 30 years that $18,000 would turn into nearly $500,000. But she didn't, because she didn't see it happening. And that's the entire game. The daily financial habit that changes everything isn't complicated. It's not crypto, it's not side hustles, it's not cutting out avocado toast. It's this: every single day before you go to sleep, you write down every dollar you spent that day. Every single one. Not at the end of the week. Not when you feel like it. Every single night. And here's why this works when everything else fails. Most people think they know where their money goes. They don't. Studies show that the average person underestimates their spending by 30 to 40%. Not because they're lying. Because human memory is terrible at tracking small transactions. You remember the $600 car repair. You don't remember the $11 you spent on lunch. Or the $4 energy drink. Or the $7 convenience store run because you forgot to buy trash bags. But your bank account remembers. When you force yourself to write down every purchase, something psychological happens. You can't lie to yourself anymore. The evidence is right there in your handwriting. And the act of writing it down creates a moment of accountability that didn't exist before. You have to face what you did with your money today. Not your intentions. Not your budget. What actually happened? This is called expenditure tracking, and it's the single most predictive behavior for long-term wealth accumulation. Not income. Not education. Tracking. Here's what happens when you actually do this for 30 days. Week 1. You're shocked. You had no idea you were spending this much on random garbage. Week 2. You start getting angry. Angry at yourself. Angry at how much money has just evaporated over the years. Week 3. Something shifts. You start hesitating before buying things. Not because someone told you to. Because you know you're going to have to write it down later. That tiny moment of friction changes your behavior without you even trying. Week 4. You start seeing patterns. You realize you spend way more on weekends. Or when you're stressed. Or when you're with certain friends. The data tells you things about yourself you never noticed. And by day 30, you're not the same person financially. You haven't made more money. You haven't gotten a promotion. You've just closed the awareness gap. But here's the part that sounds too simple to be true. Most people who do this for 30 consecutive days reduce their unnecessary spending by 20 to 35% without consciously trying to cut back. They just stop buying things they don't actually want once they have to acknowledge the purchase happened. Now let's run the uncomfortable math. Let's say you're 25 years old. You make $50,000 a year. After taxes, that's about $38,000. If you're like most people, you're spending money unconsciously on small purchases that add up to about 15% of your income. That's $5,700 a year. Now let's say you start tracking every dollar. And like most people who track, you cut that unconscious spending by 30%. That frees up $1,700 a year. $1,700 doesn't sound life-changing. It sounds like a decent tax refund. But watch what happens when you invest that $1,700 every year at an 8% return until you're 65. That's 40 years of compounding. The number that comes out is $679,000. Read that again. Nearly $700,000. Not from making more money, not from getting lucky, from tracking your spending and redirecting the waste. Now let's get even more specific. Let's say you're 35 and you've already missed 10 years. You've got 30 years left until traditional retirement age. Same scenario. $1,700 a year invested at 8%. That's $212,000. Even if you start at 45 with only 20 years to compound, that's still $86,000. This is money you already have. You're just setting it on fire in increments too small to notice. Here's the thing about budgets. They fail because they're predictive. You're trying to guess how much you'll spend next month based on who you think you are. But tracking is descriptive. It just records reality. Budgets require willpower, tracking requires honesty. And honesty is harder to fake. The reason this daily habit works is because it exploits a psychological principle called implementation intention. When you commit to a specific action at a specific time, you're exponentially more likely to follow through than if you just have a vague goal. I'm going to spend less money is a vague goal. It fails. Every night before bed, I will write down every dollar I spent today is an implementation intention. It succeeds. And the reason you do it every single day, not weekly or monthly, is because daily habits compound into identity. You start to see yourself as someone who tracks money. And people who see themselves that way make different decisions. You can't fake your way through daily tracking. You either did it or you didn't. And that binary accountability is exactly why it works. Now let's talk about what the financial industry doesn't want you to know. There's an entire ecosystem built around selling you complicated solutions to simple problems. Fancy budgeting apps with AI predictions, robo-advisors with sleek interfaces, investment newsletters promising secret strategies. And some of them are useful, some of them are fine. But here's what they don't tell you. None of it matters if you don't know where your money's going right now. You can have the perfect investment portfolio and still be broke if you're hemorrhaging cash on unconscious spending. You can have the best savings account interest rate in the world and still never build wealth if you don't have anything left to save. The financial industry makes money by selling you products, but the most valuable financial tool is free. It's a pen and a notebook. And that's the irony. The thing that actually works costs nothing and requires no expertise. You don't need to understand the stock market. You don't need to know what a Roth IRA is. You just need to be honest about what you spent today. But honesty doesn't scale. You can't sell honesty as a subscription service. So instead, we get sold complexity. Here's what's really happening. We live in an economy designed to make you spend money without thinking about it. One-click purchasing. Autosave payment information. Buy now, pay later. Subscriptions that renew automatically. Every system is optimized for frictionless spending, and frictionless spending is the enemy of wealth building. The companies that benefit from this have spent billions of dollars on behavioral psychology research to make buying things as easy and thoughtless as possible. And it's working. The average American has less than $500 in savings. Not because they're stupid. Because they're operating in an environment engineered to extract money from them in amounts too small to trigger conscious resistance. But here's the leverage point. The same behavioral psychology that makes unconscious spending so dangerous also makes tracking so powerful. When you add friction back into the spending process, when you force yourself to acknowledge every purchase, you break the system. You're not fighting willpower against billion-dollar marketing budgets. You're just creating awareness, and awareness changes behavior automatically. There's something nobody wants to say out loud about money, but it's true. Every dollar you spend is time you sold that you're never getting back. If you make $25 an hour after taxes, that $12 lunch cost you about 30 minutes of your life. That $60 dinner, 2.5 hours. That streaming service you forgot to cancel. 1 hour of work every single month, forever, until you notice. The daily tracking habit forces you to see this exchange. Not in a depressing way, in a clarifying way. Because once you see it, you start asking different questions. Is this purchase worth the time it cost me? Did I get value equal to the hours I traded? And sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes spending money makes your life better, and that's the entire point of earning it. But a lot of the time the answer is no. And that's the money that changes your life when you redirect it. Here's the part that keeps people trapped. When you choose not to track your spending, you're not really choosing to spend more money today. You're choosing to steal from your future self. Every untracked dollar that leaks out of your account is a dollar that future you won't have when they need it. Future you at 55, staring at a retirement account that's empty. Future you at 40, trying to afford a house while your friends who track their spending are buying their second property. Future you at 32, watching an incredible opportunity pass by because you don't have the savings to take the risk. And the cruelest part is that present you won't feel the consequences. Present you just feels the minor pleasure of an impulse purchase. Future you pays the bill. But when you track your spending every single day, you create a bridge between present you and future you. You make future you real, you make their needs visible, and that changes everything. So here's where we end up. The daily financial habit that makes staying poor nearly impossible isn't secret. It's not complicated. It costs nothing. It requires no expertise. It just requires honesty. Every night before you go to sleep, you write down every dollar you spent that day. That's it. But here's the thing, almost nobody does it. They'll read this, nod along, agree with the logic, and then never start. Because starting means admitting you don't know where your money goes. And that admission is uncomfortable. It's easier to believe you're good with money than to test that belief and risk being wrong. It's easier to blame your income than to acknowledge how much you spend on things that don't matter. It's easier to wait for some future version of yourself who's more disciplined, more focused, more ready. But that future version never comes. Because discipline isn't something you find. It's something you build. One day at a time. So maybe the real question isn't whether this habit works. The real question is whether you're willing to find out what happens if you actually do it. Because somewhere out there, there's a version of you 10 years from now, and that version is either thanking you or resenting you based on what you do tonight. The pen costs $1. The notebook costs $3. What's your excuse?